This one is very tough because this is Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena. Speaking of knob slobbing, I'm an unapologetic Jack Della Maddalena fan club president. I really enjoy the guy. I think right now, him and Taporia have hands down in terms of, you know, as pure boxing as it can get for MMA standards. Him and Taporia have hands down the best boxing in the UFC. I know a lot of people like to glaze Max Holloway for it. And don't get me wrong, Max Holloway is a good striker, but this isn't Krispy Kreme, and he incorporates a lot of kicks and a lot of elbows and other things into his striking. But just from a pure punches, counter punching, head movement, traditional boxing style incorporated as a heavy and integral part of their game, it's Taporia and Jack Della Maddalena leading the charge for me right now in terms of just the beauty of that good, clean, crisp boxing. And it's just really masterful to see Jack's body shots. One big problem with MMA is guys headhunt so much. And if they can't get the knockout from, head damage and everything, they get discouraged and they just hyper fixate on continuing to do it. Jack will mix it up. He'll throw to the body, simultaneous to the head, just beautiful combinations, up high, down low, keeping you guessing, keeping you on your toes, always wondering what's going to happen next. Very crisp, efficient, technical boxing. Like, I'm almost pitching a tent right now, just thinking about it and just talking about it. It really is that great, and it's that good to me. And if you don't like it, well, then sorry. But here's my problems. We've talked about the good. Let's talk about the bad. Gilbert Burns isn't the striker that Jack Della Maddalena is. I don't think very many of us with a IQ above room temperature could disagree with that. He's not the striker that Jack is. But what he is he's hands down a 4-time world jiu-jitsu champion, black belt. And I don't mean black belt as in he got it in the mail because he paid for it. Legitimate black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu with the credentials and the experience and the sub wins in the UFC to back it up. And that is hands down what makes my tent turn into a scared turtle. Let's just say that. Because something that is very troubling that I have noticed Jack Della Maddalena, funny enough, doing in his last few fights leading up to this is he's gotten really bold with doing the another guy that we'll come to later on this card, doing the Dustin Poirier jump for a guillotine. And it's a very low effort, low percentage of actually landing and winning move that has a high rate of failure. And if you do fail, leaves you very vulnerable and on your back. And as we previously discussed, you do not get points in MMA right now for being on your back and defending. You don't get points for attempting subs off your back. You're losing. The whole time you're on your back, you are actively losing just in control time. And that's not where you want to be against Gilbert Burns. And he's done it against Basil Haffitz. I want to say he possibly did it against Kevin Holland. And there's another fight recently where he's just been doing the jumping guillotine. And I don't know whether that's just because he knew he wasn't in danger with those guys and they're grappling, and he felt confident enough to just do it just for, shits and giggles. I'm really hoping, and I don't think he's that naive to think that it will work against Burns. So I've got to believe that he's been preparing in this camp to not do that and to not make that a clear part of his game. But I am still concerned because Gilbert Burns is also one of those BJJ practitioners that will try to take you down. We've talked about this on the show at length in various episodes about BJJ practitioners that just butt scoot, just lazy, half-ass guard pull techniques, all that. That's not Gilbert Burns. If he can't get a sub, he's more than content to wrestle with you and stall up against the cage until he eventually gets a double leg against the cage or a single leg against the cage and does get you down, and he will just doggedly pursue it until it happens. So that definitely gives me a lot of pause for Jack, because if he's going to be spending that much time up against the cage, he's going to be losing. Once again, even if Gilbert doesn't get the takedown, which he is good at getting the takedown, Stephen Thompson has really good takedown defense. And it was People were actively booing, but I mean, there was nothing Steven could do to stop Gilbert Burns from holding him against the fence, and he had to work for the takedown, but eventually he got it. And in the eyes of the judges, that's all that matters, is now Gilbert's winning. So I'm very afraid if Jack gets put in that position that he's just going to be completely neutralized and he won't be able to use that boxing. What gives me hope, and here's where I'm swinging for the fences again, and I'm going against the grain, but you don't come to this show for safe picks. You don't come to this show for your minty bets. You come to this show for some mushroom stamps on your head and some fire in your belly to get you pumped up and motivated for a juice to the tits card stacked top to bottom. So one time I got high off some marijuana, and I watched Jack Della Maddalena's entire fight catalog from his time in regional promotions up until the UFC. And one thing I noticed in my moment of epiphany while watching this was that Jack Della Maddalena was about to be double-legged to death by this guy, and he rode through into like a Kimura attempt and reversed it on the guy. And I remember that just stoned me away. It blew sober me away as well, but it really exploded my mind when I was stoned. I think he's going to do that to Gilbert Burns, folks. I think he's going to sub Gilbert Burns. And I'm not high right now, but he's going to do it.
I'm glad you added that. There might be some people in the comments that were wondering.
All right, I'm taking it a little bit too far with the sub, but seriously, in all seriousness, I can't commit to that even at plus 2,000. But I don't really like plus 150 at KO, TKO, DQ because Gilbert Burns is tough. But what I will say is this. I do like decision at plus 300 for Jack Della Maddalena. I'm hoping that he is able to improve upon that takedown defense because it's not something that we have seen challenged in such a great way, and especially in a way by somebody with the credentials that Gilbert Burns has. So in light of that, I'm just taking a risk here, and it's also due in part to the fact I picked against Taporia, another guy I was really high on and got burned for it. So I'm hoping that by riding with my boy, I'm satisfying both my heart and my mind here. And Jack's been the one to put himself in grappling situations so far. But once again, he hasn't been tested by somebody's grappling. So I'm curious to see what he looks like when he's not initiating it and he's defending it. I'm hoping that his defense holds up. And I think him by decision at plus 300 is pretty safe to offset the minus 166 that he currently is. And it really is tough. It is extremely tough. And I really also like the odds for Gilbert Burns because it is entirely possible he gets a sub at plus 350 and he's already got a decent money line. And it's the closest fight on the card for me, hands down. Closest fight, hands down. But I'm just going to go with Jack at the plus 300 for decision. I think even though his striking is so vastly superior, he does have power. He does have precision, timing. Gilbert's tough. Gilbert's tough. It's been a while since he's been finished. Usman managed to KO, TKO him. He's got a lot of power. But, yeah, I'm going with Jack on this. And once again, it could totally bite me in the ass, and I don't fault anybody. I can't make fun of anybody for going with Gilbert, especially with the juicy odds. But I'm just hoping my boy pulls it out. What are you thinking, Ben?
I'm thinking your head and heart and your wallet is going to be happy with Jack Della Maddalena. Watching this, I took one big takeaway from watching his fights, and I'm really happy you hit on it too. Bobby, you could KO, TKO somebody without punching them in the head. You knew that.
Exactly. Yeah.
You could drop these dudes with these shots, and that's exactly what we've seen him do. And that is a very underutilized part in MMA, which I don't think a lot of guys are trained for. Gilbert Burns obviously is going to train more for it because of who he's going up against, but it's not going to be one of the things that these guys have that muscle memory that is just natural to them. So in the camp, I think that Burns is going to be training for that. I think Maddalena, I think he's going to be training to not engage with any of the grappling. I think he's going to try his best. He does not want to do any grappling, taking it to the mat at all. He's going to want to keep this standing. Good forward pressure, and I thought that Burns actually, he can get back to the cage fairly easy. So as long as Maddalena is going forward and making sure he's the hammer and Burns is the nail, I really like Maddalena. But like you said, Burns though, he's just tough as hell, man. He is so tough. So again, I'm after last week, I'm playing it pretty safe. I like the Maddalena money line, a little juiced up. Both of them have low hands, so I could also see either one of them getting knocked out. Gilbert Burns has a sub aspect. Don't think Jack gets the sub. I don't know. I could see it being a knockout either way, decision either way, or the Burns sub. I just don't think he gets to it. But I'll just roll with Jack Della Maddalena. Also 10 years younger. That's a huge gap.
Yeah, and especially with the miles that Gilbert Burns has had, the damage. Another thing that could play a role in this is, in addition to Usman, Dan Hooker notoriously has knocked out Gilbert Burns before. Once again, that was a lighter weight class, and Gilbert Burns was definitely cutting way too much weight to make it down to 155. But nonetheless, Gilbert Burns is let's just say your chin doesn't get better with age. Your chin doesn't get better with age, and it doesn't get better the more fights you have. And if you've already been cracked before, each and every time you get cracked, you're more and more prone to getting cracked again. But nonetheless, I still like decision better at plus 300 for Jack Della Maddalena.
I like it, man. I like it. Dan Hooker, man, my second favorite hooker out there.
You better start listening to the Better in Green podcast. You will not regret it. Trust me, trust me, trust me. And hey, I'm Dean Blandino.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to Better in Green, eh? To Better in Green, eh? To Better in Green, eh? Listen in and cash out. That's what it's all about. Come on, let's make cash now. We always on spot and we cover all spots from the bottom to the top. Hey, shout out to Ethan, shout out to Wyatt, shout out to Ben. Welcome, welcome to our podcast, Better in Green.